I want to begin by expressing my gratitude for you being here, because I know that you, each and every one of you, made a choice to be here. Now, I certainly understand you may have been told by a supervisor, a manager, that you are going to go attend this training. Okay, I understand that that might have happened, but that doesn't mean that you didn't choose to be here. Because even as a manager, we can tell our employees to do something. We can give directions, we can give instructions, but our employees make the choice to follow them, right? They make the choice to follow them. And there's sort of a calculation that takes place. And that calculation is that the consequences of following the instructions are better than not following the instructions, right? And so they choose to follow the instructions, but it's still a choice. And that is a fundamentally critical, vital understanding that we have to have in order to be effective influencers on our teams, within our organizations, right, within our divisions, whatever it may be. Is we have to respect the autonomy that people have in their lives and in their careers. And I will tell you that one of the things that has really inspired me over the years to get into professional coaching, to develop and deliver workshops like this, is that, quite frankly, number one, I don't like how leadership is taught the vast majority of the time. I don't like the way that it's written about in books. I don't like the way it's taught in workshops, because it doesn't get at the heart of the conditions that have to be in place for people, number one, to become effective leaders, like truly effective leaders. And number two, which is probably even more important that you can all appreciate, is that we produce the degrees of communication and collaboration that we want to have, because we want to all achieve something that's really, really important. And so this is something that we all have in common. And that is that we want our people to get up in the morning every day looking forward to coming into work, at least as much as possible. Number two, we want them to feel that they have the tools and the environment to do their job to the best of their abilities. And then we want all of us to be able to go home at the end of the day feeling good about what we did, right? And so if we can accomplish that at least as often as humanly possible, right? Because there's no perfect day, right? Then we are going to be much more likely to be able to say to ourselves, you know what, I lead a team, or I am a member of a team that is really firing on all cylinders, that is really at its best. And that is a great, great feeling to have. And so what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to talk about these things. Now, when you walked in the door for the first time, you probably thought you were coming to a training workshop. And to some degree, you were. However, even more important than that, you walked through those doors to actually participate in a conversation. We're going to participate in a conversation together, a 3-day conversation about what it means to be an effective leader, what teamwork actually means, and how you create teamwork and how you participate and contribute to a team, right? That's why we're here. And it's really, it's going to be something that, and again, I love how Daniel really boosts up the expectations at the start of the workshop. That's probably one of the reasons why this is highly rated, because I feel pressured to get it right after that kind introduction. But this stuff really matters. And we're gonna enjoy the journey together, and we are going to leave on Thursday with an enhanced capacity to be a more effective leader and or a more effective contributor to whatever team that we are working on, okay, or working with. I know that I know that you have a lot of things competing for your time and attention. If you weren't here at this workshop for 3 days, there's a lot that you would be doing that would be keeping you busy, right? So I know that as you're sitting here, in the back of your mind, you're thinking about the other stuff that's going on back at the office or back at whatever facility you work in, right? And we've got these beautiful little devices that can remind us of how needed we are back where we work. I'm going to leave it up to you to do something very important, and that is to make the most of these 3 days by minimizing the distractions. One of the ways that I like to think about a learning experience like this is it's kind of like a meal. If I asked you to raise your hands if you've had a meal in the last 24 hours, you would all raise your hands. If I asked you if you had breakfast this morning, most or many of you would raise your hand, right? It doesn't matter how busy you are. And that's a word, by the way, I try to teach my clients not to use. Don't use the word busy. It's a useless word. It's kind of a lazy word to let people know that, we got a lot going on, right? But it doesn't matter how much you've got going on, you still have to eat, right? You have to nourish your body, because if you don't nourish your body's not going to work for you, and you're not going to be able to do anything. Well, one of the things that we have the opportunity to do at different times of our careers is to nourish our minds, to nourish the knowledge bank that we have that allows us to be more effective in whatever it is that we are doing. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about these 3 days as like an intellectual meal. We are nourishing ourselves professionally, because if we don't nourish ourselves professionally, then we cannot be as good as we want to be. Okay, so let's all agree that we're going to, number one, we're going to participate on this journey together. We're going to be in it together. We're going to talk through it together. We're going to think about it together, right? We are going to accommodate each other's ideas, thoughts. I don't mind crazy ideas coming up. That really enriches the experience. But later this afternoon, I'm going to be telling you a story about a young lady in a laboratory out in California that not only died on the job, and not only did she die about as horrific of a death as you can possibly think of, but it was a death that could have been avoided with even the most basic level of competence on the part of the manager who was in charge of that laboratory. And it was because, in my opinion, as we're going to talk about, it was because of a profound, colossal failure of leadership and a completely flawed understanding about what it means to be a leader that caused this young lady to die. So this stuff really, really matters. Now, do things like that happen often in the workplace? Oh, absolutely not, right? Thankfully, they don't. But they can. And so even though you may have a situation where, as we're going to talk about this afternoon, where you can have a catastrophic failure as the result of ineffective leadership, but even minor failures, chronic failures, can build up into really serious problems. So this subject matters. Now, what we're going to do here in just a second is we're going to go around and just kind of introduce each other. I want to learn a little bit about you and where you work, your management background, and so forth. And with a class of 50 people, it takes a little bit of time, but it's good meet each other. I know that not all of you know each other, and it's good to kind of hear where we're coming from and why we come to this class. You've heard this word culture, I'm sure, a million times. So, but by a show of hands, how many of you have employees? In other words, you are in a managerial position and you have employees that report to you. Raise your hand high. Okay, several of you. All right, go ahead and put your hands down. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you do not have managerial responsibilities? You do not have employees reporting to you. Raise your hands high. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a mix. How many of you have ever attended any kind of management or leadership training before today? Okay, many of you. So I'm sure you've had the opportunity to learn about, think about, talk about this subject of culture. And we think about culture as this sort of ethereal, ambiguous sort of entity or environment in which we operate, right? It's sort of analogous to the water that fish swim in, right? Fish need the water to survive. They swim in the water. The conditions of the water affects how the fish live and swim and so forth, but the fish are not aware of the water. They're not thinking about it. At least we presume that. I've never seen a fish interview, but I'm not exactly sure what they would say if you could interview one. So we think of culture as a thing. What I'm going to ask you to do as we get started here is to think differently about culture. And what I want you to do is I want you to think back to your high school or elementary school biology classes when you were given a petri dish, right? And you put something in the petri dish. It might have been a bacteria or some other kind of biologically active substance or material. There was the agar gel inside of the petri dish. You close it up, you keep it nice and warm, and over time you watch what grows in the petri dish, right? And so you may start with almost a microscopic bacteria, and it grows into almost like this little fuzzy plant-like material. And the reason is because you gave it the nutrients and the condition to grow. And so what did we call that? We call that a culture. That's how I would like you from this point forward to think about the word culture. And that is it's not a thing, it's not a noun, it's actually a verb. Culture is something that all of us do on a team, in a work unit, in a division, in an organization. And we can even go beyond that. We can go in a community, in a neighborhood, in society, right? We are always culturing, each and every one of us, attitudes, mindsets, ideas that are causing certain things to grow. In other words, through our words and through our behaviors, we are growing conditions that are going to affect how our team functions. And so this is really a class about culturing the right attitudes, the right ways of doing things. Regardless of the pressures that you face, bless you, regardless of the pressures you face, regardless of the demands that are on you, regardless of what you've experienced in the past, regardless of what successes you've enjoyed, either you individually or the members of your team, regardless of the hardships you have faced in your life or your career, it's only going to matter if you allow it to matter. And if you allow it to matter in the right way, because all of us have walked a path, all of us have walked a journey. That path is difficult at times, that path is easy at times. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to talk about having a positive impact on a team. We're going to talk about culturing the right attitudes, the right mindset, the right ways of doing things. And we're going to have a little bit of fun along the way. I promise.